Hi, everyone. I am afraid the title of my presentation has changed a little bit. However, it remains an assault on the concept of energy security. I made it more specific because we were told to speak about our research here at AUB. My colleague, Nadim Farajallah, spoke about or introduced the Hassan Faris Institute, so I'm not going to repeat that. However, I'm going to say a few words about the Energy Policy and Security Program. As the name says, we work or we research issues on the boundary between energy and security. Currently, we have three main funded projects. The first one is nuclear security and nuclear proliferation in the Middle East and the role of nuclear power, which is the center of my talk today. The second project is post-conflict energy planning in the Middle East with focus on Iraq, Yemen, Libya, and Syria. And the third project is geopolitics of oil and gas in the East Mediterranean. Okay, so I've been working on nuclear power in the Middle East for the past 5 years. And during that work, I have interviewed and met with many stakeholders in the countries in the Middle East that are aspiring to build a nuclear power. Different stakeholders, different directions, policymakers and lawmakers. And when you ask them, why do you want nuclear power? There are some set of fixed answers you would expect. The first answer I always get is energy security. We want to improve our energy security. We want to be more energy independent. And then comes other reasons, such as we want to substitute oil for export instead of using it domestically, especially for oil exporting countries. But also you have sometimes this implicit and subtle rationale of rebalancing geopolitics in the Middle East, which is always present in the picture whenever we talk about nuclear. I suppose the concept of energy security is very vague and it's expanding day after day, and that's why in the last minute I decided to be more specific in my talk. But as many of you in the room know, perhaps this concept is by and large is an American concept. So it originated in the early 70s following the Arab oil embargo, and these pictures of long lines for people waiting to fill their car gas tanks remained an important picture. And then President Nixon decided to take action by saying within the next decade, the US should be energy independent, which never happened, by the way. So mainly energy security initially was about securing supply of oil and other major fuel and mitigating any disruptions. These days, it would be safe to say that energy security has evolved into something much bigger and much more. And within such a crowd, I can say confidently that energy now is not a fuel, is not oil, is not gas, is not uranium. Energy now is a complex system of fixed and moving parts, and every single part in the chain is so important. But if you still convinced that oil and gas still represent energy security, this is also shifting. Now, more countries have better accessibility to oil and gas. Oil itself, the role of oil is declining. We see natural gas, liquefied natural gas, which can be transferred by ships as well, getting more attention. One thing personally I noticed when I looked at energy security in details is that always policymakers perceive or convince you that energy security is for the sake of the consumer. I think this is wrong, or this is not the accurate picture. Actually, the concept of energy security is more about producers of energy and their corporate interests. For consumers, especially now with the trend towards decentralization, consumers always have this capacity to be innovative and imaginative and everything. I'm not saying that the state should not, earlier there was a discussion about state versus non-state. Everyone has to take their part. However, energy security as a concept is mainly promoted by producers. And let me give you an example. So one of the stakeholders, or some of the stakeholders I meet with are consulting companies in the Middle East and vendors, nuclear vendors. And the same answer I get by policymakers, I get the same answer from their consultants and from the corporates. So these policymakers are heavily influenced by those who talk to them about nuclear power. So nuclear vendors have huge interest in promoting nuclear power as actually a source of ensuring energy security. Okay, I think I spoke about that. Energy security is more than oil. What is it about? It's about a combination of things. It's about the fuel, clearly, but also the technology involved, the human capacity to run this technology and deal with accidents. That's important in nuclear, by the way. And economics and finance. Some people add also environment. I wouldn't like to disregard, but also environment can be added to this picture. So, what are the misconceptions about energy security within Arab or Middle Eastern policymakers? The first one is they always confuse it with energy independence. But here's a bigger problem, because if energy security is remotely attainable, energy independence is never attainable, okay? And we have industrialized countries like the US and even Japan. In Japan in 2012, they lost overnight, because of Fukushima, around 25 to 30% of their electricity because of Fukushima. And then for the next 10 years, or the next 9 years or 8 years, they still rely on liquefied natural gas imports. So even for an industrialized country like Japan, it could go into a phase where it can be vulnerable. So energy independence is an unattainable pursuit even for countries that are much more industrialized and developed than our countries. The second thing, misconception I gauge when I meet with these policymakers is that they think about localization, and I think they're lying. I think they know that this is a lie. So they say, we want to build this technology on our land, we want to localize it. It seems so nice, it seems beautiful, especially if you want, as a politician, if you want to rally public support for your plans. But in reality, it's different. And we have big human capacity problem in dealing with these technologies. Maybe renewables have better chances of localization and more reasons, but in nuclear, never. And maybe in the discussion we can shed more light on this. The third misconception is that because it fits into this big picture of energy security, it must be economic and economically optimal and cost effective, which is also a lie. So what I'm trying to do in this short presentation, I hope, is to try to answer this question. Does nuclear power really promote energy security in the Middle East? That's the question. So when I look at basically the main two players in this nuclear debate in the Middle East, we have the customers, the 6 countries that want to build the nuclear power. Some of them are already building: Iran, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Jordan, and Egypt. But also the vendors. Who are the vendors? Who are the countries that are providing this technology? The first thing that comes to mind is that, well, if you are a country, let's say, involving with a vendor to build a nuclear power plant, this is not a normal trade or commercial exchange. No, it goes much more beyond that. It has a geopolitical implications and consequences. So the lifetime of a nuclear reactor operating alone is about 60 years. So you are stuck with this country and its politics for 60 years. So that's an important thing. And because of the sensitivity of nuclear power, then this country, this supplying country, whoever this country is, by the way, will have a diplomatic lever or leverage over you as a consumer. Now, this problem will be multiplied in countries that have small grid, like Jordan, for example. Because if Jordan builds a nuclear power plant, 30% of its electricity will be coming from one reactor. So if Russia, for whatever reason, decided to stop or not to proceed, or for any reason decided to shut down the reactor, Jordan overnight will lose 30% of its electricity. I think energy security there is very prevalent. And by the way, I'm not talking just out of nothing. Actually, there are historical cases where Russia, in particular, have used energy as a weapon. There is a reason why Iran wants to enrich uranium. Iran wants to enrich uranium because Russia, well, one of the reasons, actually, not the main reason, but one of the reasons is that Russia, on so many occasions, played with the international community to not to deliver uranium fuel to the Iranians. Russia last year attacked Ukraine's grid. It was a cyber attack. And on so many occasions, Russia every winter threatens Eastern European countries by preventing natural gas delivery to them. So the Russia have actually used energy as a weapon in the past. So why it couldn't use in the current state or the future? I'm not going to talk about this. This is just cost comparison between nuclear and renewable. I think it's outdated. We all know now that renewables are much more cost effective and better. Let's move on. But one important thing I would like to stress on the cost issue is this opportunity cost with regarding to construction time. When analysts and economists compare nuclear with renewables, they compare it based on today's value. And that's a mistake. Why? Because it takes 10 years to build a nuclear reactor, and it takes 1 to 2 years to build a utility-scale solar PV or solar CSP, whatever. So if you want to connect to the grid, your reactor will be ready in 10 years. So if you want to do a comparison, don't do it today. Do it in 10 years when the electricity is generated. And you can see here from the Emirate case, when they started, nuclear was okay, cost with renewables, but now the Emiratis, the opportunity cost for the Emiratis by missing out on renewables is huge. Okay, localization, I think we can relate why localization is not a good idea for nuclear. It costs money, obviously. If you want to build a supply chain, you have to invest first, and a lot of these countries don't have the financial resources. Biggest problem, we don't have human capacity. This is an important issue. And by the way, on the human capacity issue, I'm not sure if we have Egyptian friends in the audience. In Egypt, they say the most ready Arab country for nuclear is Egypt. And if you ask why, they say because we have a lot of nuclear engineers. And as if building a nuclear, actually, building a nuclear power requires very, very few physicists and nuclear engineers, and requires much more other types of engineering, chemical engineering, civil engineering, and other metals expert, etc. So the number of nuclear engineers is not an indication of having human capacity. But also you have supplier politics, and that I spoke about earlier. I'll skip this. The last part of my presentation is the ugly side of nuclear power. The reality, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, is that there is a substantial overlap between peaceful nuclear and non-peaceful nuclear. And any peaceful nuclear could be converted into a non-peaceful program. And that's why, for example, we have a debate over Iran's nuclear program. So in the Middle East, we have a history of nuclear proliferation. We have one of the countries here, okay, that already have 80 to 100 nuclear weapons. We have countries that tried in the past to have a weaponized nuclear program. We have countries that have civil nuclear programs that were attacked. So we have a history of everything. But one last thing that keeps me awake at night is not what states can do, because you can always assume some rationality in the end, is what non-state actors can do. So I think 5-6 months ago, this was on Reuters. So the Yemeni Houthis claimed that they have shot or fired a ballistic missile on Al-Baraka nuclear power plant in Abu Dhabi, which is under construction. Of course, the Emirati response was very arrogant by saying, no, this never happened. We have all these anti-ballistic missile systems that we can deal with it. Don't worry about it. As if the problem, if the news was correct or not. That's not the problem. The problem that this group thought about it as a target, that's the problem. So for these groups, and you think of terrorism in the Middle East, for these non-state actors, they have been empowered not only with their expertise, but also in terms of missile and payload and everything. And you have Houthis in Yemen that can target close nuclear facilities such as Abu Dhabi. But you have also in Sinai, in Egypt, they can also target the Dab'a power plant in Egypt. So this is for me, I think, is more of a danger than what states can do. Just summarizing this presentation is, I think the role of nuclear power in promoting energy security is at least questionable, if not negative. All deployment scenarios, when we look at them, whether the country wants to have access to fuel cycle or not, have substantial weaknesses and security vulnerabilities. And sadly, nuclear reactors can be effective targets for non-state actors and also an armed conflict. I realize that my talk did not mention Lebanon, and maybe this is a Lebanon session. However, if anyone is interested in discussing energy security stories from Lebanon, I'm ready in the discussion. Thank you.